All right, so far in Chapter 1 we've talked about kinematics, osteokinematics and arthrokinematics, which is the movements without regard to forces. Now we're going to talk about kinetics, which is the branch of mechanics that describes the effects of forces on the body. So in biological systems, when we're talking about force, we're talking about a push or a pull that can produce, modify, or halt a movement. So internal force is generated within the body, usually by muscles, and external force is generated outside the body, often by gravity, but it can be something else, like a therapist moving your arm, or a machine moving your arm, or a dog pulling you on a leash, something like that. So internal force is generated within the body, external force is outside the body. In the picture here, we have the biceps generating an internal force to flex the elbow against the external force of gravity. So torque is the rotational equivalent of force. So in the beginning of the chapter, when there was the picture of the guy running, he was experiencing translatory rectilinear motion, running in a straight line. He was also experiencing rotational motion by moving his joints to generate that force to produce the translation. So the rotational force that we generate with our muscles is generated across a joint. The amount of torque generated across the joint depends on the amount of force extended, so a lot of times the strength of the muscle or how much you're exerting, and the distance between the force and the axis of rotation. So the force is at the insertion of the muscle, usually, and the axis of rotation is at the joint where the motion is being activated. The distance between the force and the axis of rotation is called the moment arm. And we will talk about the internal moment arm and external moment arm. Internal torques are generated internally by muscles usually, and external torques are generated externally, often by gravity or by other things. So the other names for internal moment arm and external moment arm are force arm and resistance arm. So you will hear both of those things used. Internal torque is a lot of times called force, and external torque is called resistance. But we'll see when we do lever analysis that sometimes the internal force is dominant, and sometimes the external force is dominant, depending on the type of muscle action that you're doing. So hopefully you've already had something about biomechanical levers in anatomy and physiology. We're going to briefly go over them, and then we'll revisit them again in the muscle chapter when we're talking about lever analysis. So the first class lever, it's the mechanical example is the seesaw or the teeter-totter. It's the fulcrum or axis located between the internal external force, or located between the force and the resistance, if you want to think of it like that. The biomechanical example is the cranium sitting on top of the first cervical vertebra. So the axis is in the middle, and the force and the resistance are on either side of the axis. And I'll tell you some acronyms for each of these. So the second class lever, the axis is on one end, the force is on the other, and the resistance is in the middle. The way they say it in our text, the axis of rotation is located at one end of the bony lever. Internal moment arm is always longer than the external moment arm. So the internal moment arm is the force, and the external moment arm is the resistance. Resistance is in between force and axis. Third class lever, the axis is at one end, the resistance is at the other, and the force is in the middle. So the axis of rotation located at one end of the bony lever, internal moment arm always smaller than the external moment arm. Okay, most of the biomechanical levers in our body for concentric muscle contractions are third-class levers, and third-class levers favor motion. Second-class levers favor force. So there are most of our concentric muscle levers are Third class, most of our eccentric ones are second class. There are exceptions to those, but the general rule is that third class concentric, second class eccentric. Third class motion, second class power. So the acronyms that we use for these use force, axis, and resistance to make the acronym. So the first class lever is FAR, F-A-R, force, axis, resistance. The axis is in between the force and resistance. The second class lever, the acronym is ARF, A-R-F, like a dog would say ARF. And my stupid mnemonic for this is second class dog, A-R-F. Axis is on one end, force is on the other, and resistance is in the middle. The third class lever is AFR, axis on one end, force in the middle, resistance on the other end. And I always think I bought a third class ticket to Africa. So mnemonics don't have to make sense, they just have to help you remember them. So FAR, ARF, and AFR. Those are our acronyms for the biomechanical levers. So this is an example from the book where they're comparing the, and it's on page 14 if you want to look at it. It's the biceps versus the brachioradialis, a third class lever versus a second class lever, depending on which type of motion you want to do. So when you're doing, or what the purpose of why you want to flex your elbow, basically. So when you're using the biceps for elbow flexion, it's a third class lever because the axis, the force is between the axis and the resistance. When you're using the brachioradialis, which inserts out at the wrist, the resistance is between the force and the axis. So it favors a more powerful muscle action, and the biceps favors more motion. So there's an exposition in the book on page 14, which is fairly interesting. Really, this is just to contrast a second class and a third class lever, and to show how muscle attachment changes the class of the lever. So the line of pull describes the direction of muscular force, and it's defined as a vector. So a vector is a force that has direction, if you want to think of it that way. So if you know the origin and insertion of a muscle, you know where it's located with respect to the axis of rotation, that will give you what its action is. So that's the really good reason for knowing all those origins and insertions, is because once you know the origin and insertion and you know where it is in relationship to the axis, you automatically know what motion that muscle does. So, with the medial lateral axis of rotation, if the line of pull is in a sagittal plane motion, medial lateral axis, sagittal plane, if the line of pull is anterior to the axis, you're going to get flexion. If it's posterior to the axis, you're going to get extension. Okay, so the location of the line of pull tells you what the action is going to be. So with an anterior-posterior axis, that's the frontal plane, lateral motion pulls the bone laterally, medial motion pulls the bone medially. And that makes sense, doesn't it? With a vertical axis of rotation in the transverse or horizontal plane, anterior or medial pull produces inward rotation. Posterior or lateral pull produces rotation away from the midline, or external rotation. Okay, so the line of pull really makes sense for the direction of muscular force and the action that it produces. So a lot of times when you're trying to memorize those origin, insertion, action, and innervation, if you get the origin and insertion, you know where it is on the body, find it on yourself. You always have a cheat sheet with you. It's your own body. You will know whether it's anterior or posterior to the medial lateral axis and whether it produces flexion or extension. So knowing those origins and insertions automatically gives you the action if you think of the line of pull. So vectors, they represent the magnitude and direction of a force. So when you're drawing out vectors, the magnitude of the force is indicated by the relative length of the vector line, and the direction is indicated by an arrowhead. So when you combine vector sources, you get a resultant vector. So the example is these two guys that are pulling, I don't know what that is, a donut maybe? They're pulling a giant donut. One guy's pulling a little bit to the right and towards him, the other guy's pulling a little bit to the left and towards him, and the resultant vector is the donuts moving straight in between them. Okay, when we unbalance the forces a little bit and get more pull to the right, the resultant vector is going to be more to the right. That makes sense. Okay, where this comes into play is when we start talking about muscle imbalances and when we start talking about patellofemoral dysfunction, what muscles are going to result in a different line of pull on that patella. So if in the Why We Care section, that's why we care about vectors. So in kinesiology, we can think of the body as being a biological machine that rotates bony levers powered by muscular pulleys. It's kind of cool, really. Some muscular levers are designed to produce large torques. So those are going to be like the second-class levers. Other ones are designed for producing high speeds or covering large distances. So a lot of our appendicular skeleton, our large bony levers, are third-class levers because we're trying to reach up and grab something, or we're trying to step out and take a big step. So if you think of things in terms of levers and pulleys, sometimes it simplifies that biomechanical motion and makes it into something that is easier to understand. So in the next chapter, we're going to start talking about joints, and we're going to talk about the structure of joints and the function of joints and different types of joints. And we'll also review bone anatomy and function, and hopefully that's a review for you from anatomy and physiology. And then in the following chapter, also in Module 2, we'll talk about the anatomy and physiology of muscles, and then the function of muscles, like how they actually work and what they do. So we will revisit the idea of levers in the muscle chapter, and in lab we will do functional lever analysis to figure out how things work.